If you think you know Game of Thrones, think again. What you're about to discover will completely shatter everything you believed about this world. These aren't just fan theories. These are revelations that expose the hidden puppet masters who've been controlling Westeros for thousands of years. We're talking about secret organizations that caused the greatest catastrophe in history, ancient aliens living in our oceans, and magical conspiracies that make the Iron Throne look like a children's toy. By the end of this, you'll realize that every major event you witnessed was orchestrated by forces so powerful and patient that human lifespans are just blips on their timeline. The Night King wasn't the real villain. The Faceless Men aren't just assassins, and that innocent organization preparing dead bodies. They're actually running the most sophisticated spy network in history. Ready to see how deep this rabbit hole goes? Theory 1. The Faceless Men caused history's greatest catastrophe. You'll never see them the same way. What if the greatest catastrophe in the history of the known world wasn't an accident or natural disaster, but the result of the most ambitious assassination contract ever undertaken? The doom of Valyria, that cataclysmic event that destroyed the mightiest empire in history, might have been orchestrated by the very organization we know today as the Faceless Men. We know the Faceless Men originated in the volcanic slave mines of Valyria, where desperate souls prayed for the gift of death to escape their torment. But what if their role wasn't just reactive? What if they became active agents of cosmic justice on an unprecedented scale? Picture this. A coalition of the wronged, perhaps surviving Giscari nobility, still burning with rage over their empire's destruction. Or Rhoynar refugees whose civilization was drowned by Valyrian dragon lords, approaches this nascent death cult with an impossible contract. Not to kill a king or a lord, but to destroy an entire civilization that had grown too powerful, too arrogant, too dangerous to the balance of the world. The price wouldn't be gold or land. What could buy such devastation? Instead, the payment might have been something far more esoteric. The souls of those lost in the cataclysm. Or perhaps the promise to destroy dangerous Valyrian knowledge that threatened the very fabric of reality. Think about it. Valyrian magic wasn't just about dragons and fire. They had conquered death itself in some ways, extended lifespans unnaturally, bent the elements to their will. What if this power was growing beyond what the world could safely contain? The Faceless Men, with their deep understanding of death, and their growing network within Valyrian society, would have been uniquely positioned to carry out such a contract. They had access to the volcanic foundries, knowledge of the structural weaknesses of the 14 Flames, and most importantly, they had nothing left to lose. This would reframe the entire organization. They're not just assassins, they're agents of cosmic rebalancing. Every gift they give isn't just murder, but a correction to prevent any power from becoming absolute. The reverence they show for death isn't morbid, it's philosophical. They see themselves as servants of a greater equilibrium. Consider how this changes everything we know about them. Their seemingly random contracts, their presence in Braavos, a city founded by escaped slaves, their interest in Arya Stark, connected to ancient northern magic, their possible connection to Targaryen bloodlines, it all becomes part of a pattern, spanning centuries. They're not just killers for hire, they're guardians against the kind of unchecked power that once threatened to consume the world. The doom wasn't divine punishment or natural disaster. It was the ultimate assassination, carried out by those who had suffered most under Valyrian dominion. And if this theory holds true, it means the Faceless Men are still out there, watching, waiting, ready to act again if any power grows too great, too dangerous, too reminiscent of what Valyria became. Theory 2. The Night King was actually the good guy. This changes everything. Everything we think we know about the Night King and the others might be completely wrong. What if the Night King wasn't a mindless force of destruction, but rather the last desperate enforcer of an ancient pact that had been violated by the living? The methodical nature of the Night King's march south wasn't random destruction. It was purposeful, targeted, almost legal in its precision. He didn't just kill indiscriminately, he sought specific individuals, specific bloodlines, specific locations. His focus on Bran Stark, his timing, his apparent intelligence, none of this suggests a simple force of evil. Instead, it suggests someone operating under the terms of an ancient contract that had been broken. Imagine this. Thousands of years ago, when the long night first ended, the pact between the first men and the others wasn't just about building the wall and staying on opposite sides. It was a complex agreement involving cyclical offerings, balanced exchanges, or perhaps tribute that would ensure both species could coexist. The first men would provide something, perhaps specific bloodlines, certain artifacts, or even just acknowledgement and remembrance, and in exchange, the others would remain dormant. But over the millennia, the pact was forgotten. The living stopped honoring their obligations. The children of the forest, who might have been the original mediators of this agreement, withdrew from human affairs. The sacred groves were cut down, the old ways abandoned, the promised offerings never delivered. From the perspective of the others, humanity had committed the ultimate breach of contract. The Night King's resurrection and march south wasn't conquest. It was debt collection on a cosmic scale. He was trying to reclaim what had been promised to his people centuries ago, or force the living to acknowledge and renew the ancient agreement. His interest in Bran makes perfect sense in this context. Bran, as the three-eyed raven, was the living repository of memory, the only one who might still understand the original terms of the pact. Think about the symbols the others left behind, those spiral patterns that seem so ominous. What if they weren't threats, but rather reminders? Ancient signatures on a contract that had been ignored for too long. The arrangement of bodies, the careful preservation of certain individuals as whites. Perhaps these were specific terms being carried out according to some forgotten protocol. This reframes the entire conflict. The others weren't evil invaders. They were the wronged party in an ancient dispute. The Night King's apparent invincibility, his ability to raise the dead, his command over winter itself, these weren't just magical powers, but perhaps the enforcement mechanisms built into the original pact. The living had been given thousands of years to honor their agreement, and when they failed, the supernatural consequences were unleashed. Even his death might not be the end, but rather a pause. The pact's terms might still be unfulfilled, the debt unpaid. Until humanity remembers what they owe to the ancient forces of ice and death, until the balance is restored or a new agreement forged, the threat might simply be dormant, waiting for the next breach, the next generation to forget the lessons written in ice and blood. Theory 3. Why the Faceless Men really wanted Arya. It's not what you think. The Faceless Men's interest in Arya Stark might not have been as random as it seemed. What if the House of Black and White has maintained a specific, centuries-long fascination with Targaryen blood, and Arya's training was part of a much larger, more sinister plan? Consider the origins. The Faceless Men emerged from the ashes of Valyria, born from the suffering inflicted by Dragon Lords. Targaryens were the only major Dragon Lord family to escape the doom, a catastrophe the Faceless Men may have orchestrated. From their perspective, the Targaryens represent unfinished business, the last remnant of the power structure they sought to destroy. But it goes deeper than simple revenge. Targaryen blood possesses unique properties that would fascinate an organization dedicated to understanding death and transformation. Targaryens have prophetic dreams, unusual resistance to disease, the ability to bond with dragons, and that mysterious quality that makes them either mad or brilliant. When a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin. For worshippers of the many-faced god, who see death as the ultimate transformation, Targaryen blood represents something extraordinary. A bloodline that seems to exist partially outside normal human limitations. Now enter Arya Stark. On the surface, she's just a noble girl seeking revenge training. But look deeper. She's a Stark, descended from the first men, connected to the ancient magics of the North, to warging, to the old gods. More importantly, she's intimately connected to Jon Snow, who, unknown to almost everyone, carries Targaryen blood. The Faceless Men, with their extensive spy network, likely knew or suspected Jon's true parentage long before it was revealed. Arya's training wasn't standard. She was taught to change faces, to become no one, but she consistently failed to fully abandon her identity. Most initiates who can't let go of themselves are killed or expelled. Arya was kept, trained further, given special attention. Why? Because her connection to Stark magic, combined with her link to hidden Targaryen blood, made her uniquely valuable. The many-faced god isn't just about death. It's about transformation, about the spaces between identities, between life and death. Targaryen blood, with its connection to fire, dreams and dragons, represents a form of transformation magic that could complement or enhance the Faceless Men's abilities. They might seek to understand how Targaryen fire magic could be combined with their death magic, or how Targaryen prophetic abilities could be harnessed for their purposes. Think about the gifts the Faceless Men offer. They don't just kill people. They offer specific deaths tailored to each target. For Targaryens, with their complex relationship with fire and madness, the gifts might be specially crafted. Perhaps they're studying how to kill dragons, how to counteract Targaryen fire immunity, or how to corrupt the dragon dreams that give Targaryens their prophetic edge. Arya's return to Westeros, her list of names, her newfound abilities. What if these aren't just the result of her training, but part of a larger Faceless Men operation targeting the remaining powers in Westeros? Her position gives them access to information about the remaining major houses, the political situation, and most importantly, any surviving Targaryens or those connected to them. The House of Black and White might be playing an incredibly long game, using Arya as an unwitting agent to gather intelligence, sow chaos, or position themselves for a final reckoning with the Dragon Lord legacy that escaped their justice centuries ago. Theory 4. The real reason. There must always be a Stark in Winterfell. It's not about leadership. The Winterfell crypts aren't just tombs. They're the most important magical defense system in all of Westeros, and the Starks have been its unwitting guardians for thousands of years. The phrase, "There must always be a Stark in Winterfell," has nothing to do with ruling the North and everything to do with preventing something ancient and terrible from breaking free. Think about the sheer scale of these crypts. They stretch deep. Underground, older levels collapsed and forgotten, filled with generations upon generations of Stark dead. Each statue holds an iron sword across its lap, officially to keep the restless spirits at bay. But what if that's just a simplified explanation for something far more complex and crucial? The iron swords aren't just symbolic. Iron has always been significant in northern magic. It's what the others fear, what disrupts certain types of enchantments. These blades, positioned with such precision across so many centuries, might form a massive magical grid or ward system. Each Stark interred there, especially those with strong wolf blood, the genetic marker for warging and other mystical abilities, contributes their spiritual essence to reinforce this ancient barrier. But what exactly are they keeping locked away? The answer might lie in the deepest, oldest parts of the crypts that have supposedly collapsed. What if they didn't collapse naturally, but were deliberately sealed? The Kings of Winter, the ancient Stark rulers, weren't just burying their dead. They were feeding a lock that required the spiritual power of their bloodline to maintain. Consider the timing of when Starks leave Winterfell and what follows. When Ned went south, the Stark line was broken for the first time in millennia. Almost immediately, the supernatural threats began stirring. The others returned. Direwolves came south of the wall for the first time in centuries. Magic began returning to the world in earnest. This wasn't coincidence. It was cause and effect. The entity or force trapped beneath Winterfell might be something that predates even the others. Perhaps it's connected to the original war between the children of the forest and the first men. Some primordial force of winter or earth that was defeated and imprisoned rather than destroyed. The children, with their deep magic, and the first men, with their iron and determination, might have forged this prison together as part of their eventual pact. The wolf dreams that plague Stark children aren't just genetic warding ability. They're the psychic pressure of this ancient ward system calling to them, ensuring that Stark blood remains tied to Winterfell. The stronger the mystical bloodline, the more vivid the dreams, the stronger the compulsion to return home. Even the layout of Winterfell itself supports this theory. The castle sits atop hot springs that never freeze, even in the deepest winter. This isn't just convenient, it's suspicious. The heat might be leaking up from whatever magical furnace powers this prison. The God's Wood, with its ancient heart tree, serves as both a monitoring system and a control mechanism, allowing the old gods and the children to keep watch over their ancient work. Bran's transformation into the three-eyed raven becomes even more significant in this context. He's not just gaining mystical knowledge. He's becoming the ultimate guardian of this system, someone with the power to reinforce, or if necessary, completely reconstruct the magical barriers that have protected the world for millennia. The crypts, called to the dead during the Battle of Winterfell, not because they were evil, but because the magical system was under unprecedented stress. The proximity of the Night King, the massive death toll above, the presence of so much necromantic magic, it all overloaded a system designed to contain something far older and potentially more dangerous than even the army of the dead. Theory 5. The Silent Sisters know everything, and they've been playing the game longer than anyone. The Silent Sisters appear to be humble servants of the stranger, bound by vows of silence and dedicated to preparing the dead for their final rest. But what if their true purpose is far more sinister and politically significant? What if they constitute the most effective intelligence network in Westerosi history, hiding in plain sight behind religious vows and ceremonial duties? Consider their unique position in society. The Silent Sisters have access to literally every significant death in Westeros. They prepare the bodies of kings and beggars alike, but more importantly, they're present for the intimate final moments of noble houses. They witness deathbed confessions, overhear funeral planning conversations, observe the genuine grief or relief of heirs, and have access to personal effects that reveal secrets the deceased took to their graves. Their vow of silence isn't a spiritual discipline, it's operational security. They can't be questioned, can't be forced to testify, can't betray secrets even under torture because they've trained themselves never to speak. But silence doesn't mean they can't communicate. Over centuries, they could have developed elaborate systems of coded gestures, symbolic arrangements of funeral preparations, or messages hidden within the funerary rites themselves. Think about how information travels in their network. A Silent Sister in King's Landing prepares a lord who died under suspicious circumstances. She notices poison residue, sees telltale signs of struggle, overhears family members discussing inheritance disputes. This information gets passed through coded funeral arrangements to a sister traveling to another hold, who carries it to colleagues across the realm. Within weeks, every major house's secrets are flowing through this network. The beauty of their system is its apparent neutrality. No one suspects the Silent Sisters of political manipulation because they serve death itself. supposedly the most impartial force in existence. But what if their interpretation of serving the stranger includes balancing the scales of justice, ensuring that murderers face consequences, that tyrants fall, that the natural order reasserts itself when human ambition grows too destructive? They don't act directly. That would break their cover and destroy centuries of careful positioning. Instead, they practice the subtlest form of influence: strategic information placement. A silent sister might accidentally drop a letter while preparing a body, ensuring it's found by the right person. They might arrange funeral items in ways that hint at hidden truths, or time their movements to ensure certain people encounter each other at crucial moments. Their influence on succession could be enormous. They know which heirs are legitimate, which deaths were natural, which marriages were consummated, which lords died with unfinished business or hidden debts. By selectively revealing or concealing this information, they could guide inheritance disputes, prevent civil wars, or ensure that power falls to more capable or moral hands. The network's longevity gives them perspectives that dwarf even the masters. While maesters serve individual houses and change loyalties with their assignments, silent sisters maintain institutional memory across generations. They remember patterns, recognize recurring family weaknesses, and can predict political developments based on centuries of observing human nature at its most vulnerable moments. During times of great upheaval, like Robert's Rebellion or the War of the Five Kings, their information becomes even more valuable. They know which alliances are genuine, which lords are wavering, which armies are weakened by disease or desertion. This intelligence, carefully distributed to the right parties, at the right moments, could determine the outcomes of battles and the fates of kingdoms. The most chilling possibility is that they've been guiding Westerosi history for millennia, nudging events towards some long-term goal that only they understand. Perhaps they serve a deeper interpretation of the stranger's will, not just death as an ending, but death as a reset mechanism for societies that have grown too corrupt or unstable. Their patience spans generations, their perspective encompasses entire dynasties, and their methods are so subtle that no one realizes they're being manipulated. Law Foundation. The Silent Sisters' access to significant deaths throughout Westerosi history, their vows of silence and religious neutrality, their presence at intimate family moments during times of grief, and their institutional continuity across political upheavals. Theory 6. The children of the forest never left. They're playing the longest game in history. The children of the forest didn't retreat from human civilization. They went underground, literally and figuratively, to begin the most patient conquest in the history of Westeros. While men built kingdoms and fought wars over territory and gold, the children embarked on a multi-millennial plan to gradually reclaim their ancient homeland through subtlety, magic, and an understanding of deep time that humans can barely comprehend. The pact between the first men and the children was never meant to be permanent from the children's perspective. It was a strategic retreat, a temporary accommodation, while they developed new methods of influence that didn't rely on open warfare. They learned from their initial defeat that direct confrontation with humans was futile. Men breed faster, adapt quicker, and have an inexhaustible appetite for conquest. So the children chose a different approach: patient biological and magical warfare conducted over millennia. Their first strategy was genetic. Rather than fighting the spread of human settlement, they began selectively breeding certain bloodlines to carry dormant children traits. The Stark line's powerful warging abilities didn't evolve naturally. They were carefully cultivated over generations through subtle magical intervention. The wolf blood that runs in certain Starks isn't just a metaphor for wildness. It's literally non-human genetic material that allows the children to maintain influence through human proxies. The Weirwood network serves as their intelligence and communication system. Every carved face watches, listens, and remembers. The old gods aren't just spiritual entities. They're the collective consciousness of the children, using the trees as a biological internet that spans the continent. Through this network, they monitor human activities, guide favorable bloodlines, and slowly manipulate events toward their long-term goals. Their creation of the others wasn't a desperate mistake. It was a calculated gambit in their larger strategy. They knew the others would eventually become uncontrollable, but they also knew that the threat would force humans to unite, to rediscover magic, and most importantly, to turn back to the old gods for protection. The Long Night wasn't just about destroying human civilization. It was about reminding humans of their dependence on powers they didn't understand. The children's influence extends far beyond the north. The mystical bloodlines scattered throughout Westeros, the Stark warging, the Targaryen dragon dreams, even the rumored magical abilities of certain other houses, might all trace back to careful children intervention. They've been playing genetic chess for thousands of years, creating human bloodlines that carry just enough of their essence to serve as unwitting agents. Their partnership with Bran represents the culmination of this strategy. By merging with the three-eyed raven, Bran becomes a hybrid consciousness, part human, part children, with access to both the weirwood network and human political power. He's not just a king. He's the children's ultimate Trojan horse, installed at the heart of human governance. The timing of various supernatural events supports this theory. Magic doesn't return randomly to the world. It returns when the children decide it's time. The birth of dragons, the awakening of the others, the resurgence of warging and green-seeing abilities. These all occur because the children have decided that the current human political order has grown too destructive or stable and needs to be destabilized. Their long-term goal isn't the extinction of humanity. Humans have proven too adaptable for that approach. Instead, they're working toward a hybrid future where human civilization exists, but operates within limits set by the children's deeper understanding of natural balance. They want a world where the weirwoods are respected, where the old gods hold sway, where magic and nature are given proper reverence. The wars that periodically devastate Westeros serve their purposes perfectly. Each conflict weakens human institutions, reduces population pressure on the natural world, and creates opportunities for the children to guide recovery toward more favorable arrangements. The War of the Five Kings wasn't just human ambition running wild. It was the children allowing accumulated tensions to explode in a way that would ultimately serve their interests. Theory 7. Shiera Seastar's magic never died. She's still pulling strings from beyond the grave. Shiera Seastar, the most beautiful and mysterious bastard daughter of Aegon IV, didn't simply die and fade into history. Her mastery of sorcery was so profound that she achieved something far more subtle and terrifying than immortality. She became a lingering magical influence that continues to shape events across Westeros and Essos centuries after her physical death. Unlike Bloodraven, who merged with the weirwoods and became the three-eyed raven, Shiera chose a different path to transcendence. Her magic was never about nature or divine sight. It was about glamour, seduction, divination, and the manipulation of human desires. She specialized in the magic of appearances, the sorcery of influence, the art of making people see what she wanted them to see and desire what she wanted them to desire. Her legendary beauty wasn't just genetics, it was the result of magical enhancement and manipulation. The silver and emerald necklace she wore wasn't mere jewelry, but a powerful focus that allowed her to project her will into the world around her. This artifact, and others like it that she created, became anchors for her consciousness after her physical death. Her essence lingers in these objects, in the bloodlines she influenced, and in the places where her magic was strongest. Consider the uncanny insights and sudden inspiration that certain characters experience throughout the series. Tyrion's brilliant political maneuvers during his time as Hand, Varys's seemingly impossible network of information, even Littlefinger's ability to manipulate complex political situations. What if these aren't just natural talents, but the result of Shiera's lingering influence guiding those who serve her posthumous agenda? Her magic specialized in seeing through deception and creating it in equal measure. She could penetrate any disguise, uncover any lie, but she could also craft illusions so perfect that even she sometimes forgot what was real. This dual nature of her sorcery means that her influence works both ways, sometimes revealing hidden truths to advance her goals, sometimes creating beautiful lies that serve her purposes better than reality. The great Game of Thrones itself might be influenced by her continuing presence. Shiera was always fascinated by power dynamics, by the dance of influence and manipulation that determined who ruled and who served. Her ghostly influence could be nudging events toward more interesting configurations, ensuring that the political landscape remains dynamic and unpredictable because stagnation bored her in life and continues to bore her in death. Her rivalry with Bloodraven takes on new dimensions when viewed through this lens. While Bloodraven achieved a form of immortality through merger with ancient nature magic, Shiera chose to persist through human connections, emotional bonds, and the artifacts she left behind. Their conflict continues even now, with Bloodraven working through Bran and the Weirwood network, while Shiera operates through more subtle channels of human ambition and desire. The mysterious prophecies and dreams that guide certain characters might not all come from legitimate magical sources. Some could be Shiera's fabrications, designed to move pieces on the board in ways that amuse or benefit her. She was known for her love of complexity and her disdain for simple solutions, the intricate plots and seemingly impossible coincidences that drive major events could be her handiwork. Her influence might be strongest in places where beauty, luxury, and political intrigue intersect. The courts of kings, the parlors of wealthy merchants, the private chambers where deals are struck and alliances forged. These are the environments where her particular brand of magic would thrive. She feeds off ambition, vanity, and the hunger for power that drives the great game. The magical artifacts that appear throughout the series, the glass candles of the Meisters, certain Valyrian steel weapons with unusual properties, jewelry that seems to hold more significance than its material worth, might be part of a network of enchanted objects that she created or influenced. Through these items, she maintains windows into the world, allowing her to observe, influence, and occasionally act directly when the stakes are high enough. Her ultimate goal remains unclear, but it likely involves a world where beauty, wit, and subtle power are valued over brute force and obvious dominance. She was always the spider in the web, the power behind thrones rather than the one sitting on them. Even in death, she continues to prefer influence to direct control, manipulation to confrontation. Theory 8. The drowned god is actually an ancient alien species, and the Ironborn are their hybrids. The religion of the drowned god isn't a faith at all. It's a cargo cult built around humanity's ancient contact with an aquatic non-human species that still lurks in the deepest parts of the ocean. The Ironborn aren't just fierce raiders, they're the hybrid descendants of this otherworldly race, and their entire culture is based on maintaining a connection to their inhuman ancestors. The phrase, "what is dead, may never die, but rises again," harder and stronger, isn't a metaphor for resurrection. It's a literal description of the transformation that occurs when human genetics merge with the biology of these deep ones. The drowning ritual that Ironborn priests perform isn't killing and reviving people. It's activating dormant genetic traits that allow humans to survive underwater, breathe beneath the waves, and tap into the collective consciousness of their aquatic progenitors. Think about the unique abilities that Ironborn display. Their legendary skill at seafaring goes beyond normal human capability. They seem to have an innate understanding of ocean currents, weather patterns, and navigation that borders on supernatural. Their ability to hold their breath for impossible lengths of time, their comfort in freezing water, their instinctive knowledge of where to find fish and salvage. These aren't learned skills. They're genetic memories inherited from their non-human ancestors. The gifts that the drowned god supposedly provides, strength, resilience, fearlessness, are actually the result of activating dormant DNA sequences that trace back to this ancient aquatic race. The Ironborn who undergo the drowning ritual successfully are those with enough of the old bloodline to survive the transformation. Those who die simply lack the genetic compatibility to handle the change. The deep ones themselves aren't extinct. They've simply retreated to the deepest ocean trenches, waiting for the right time to reclaim the surface world. The Ironborn serve as their reconnaissance and advance force, keeping human civilization off balance and ensuring that no one power becomes strong enough to threaten the oceans themselves. The constant raiding and reaving isn't just cultural aggression. It's a systematic campaign to prevent coastal civilizations from developing advanced naval technologies or magical abilities that could penetrate the deep waters where their ancestors dwell. The krakens that the Ironborn revere aren't just large squids, they're the war beasts and transportation systems of the deep ones, creatures that have been bred and modified over millennia to serve as living ships and weapons. The ability of certain Ironborn to supposedly communicate with sea creatures isn't mystical. It's the activation of biological communication systems that their ancestors used to coordinate with their aquatic ecosystem. The Iron Islands themselves might be artificially positioned, ancient outposts or monitoring stations placed by the deep ones to maintain contact with their hybrid offspring. The rich iron deposits that give the islands their name could be the remnants of advanced metallurgy techniques used by the aquatic race, metals that humans learned to work by copying abandoned Deep One technologies. The Ironborn's disdain for the Greenlands and their preference for taking what they need rather than farming or building reflects their ancestral programming. They're not meant to be a settled agricultural people because their genetic heritage is nomadic and predatory, adapted for life in the vast resource-rich oceans rather than the confined spaces of land-based civilization. Even their appearance supports this theory. Many Ironborn have the lean build, pale skin, and dark hair that would be adaptive for deep-water living. Their eyes often show unusual colors or reflective qualities that could be remnants of adaptations for seeing in the low-light conditions of the deep ocean. The timing of their increased activity often coincides with other magical events in the world. When dragons return, when the others stir, when the balance of power shifts dramatically, the Ironborn become more aggressive and their drowning rituals more successful. This suggests that their connection to the Deep Ones is tied to broader, magical cycles that affect the entire planet. The ultimate goal of this hybrid program might be to gradually prepare humanity for an eventual return of the Deep Ones to surface dominance. The Ironborn serve as both an advance force and a test case, proving that humans can be successfully integrated into the aquatic civilization while maintaining enough surface world capability to serve as intermediaries when the two species eventually need to interact on a larger scale. Theory 9. The Weeping Lady of Lys represents a lost school of Valyrian water magic, and her descendants still exist. The legend of the Weeping Lady of Lys isn't just a romantic tale about a beautiful woman whose tears became a deadly poison. It's the last remnant of a sophisticated school of Valyrian magic that specialized in water, emotion, and biological manipulation. A tradition that was deliberately suppressed by the fire-focused dragon lords but never completely eliminated. While most people associate Valyrian magic exclusively with fire and dragons, The Valyrian freehold was vast and diverse enough to encompass many different magical traditions. The Weeping Lady represented a lineage of sorcerers who had mastered the manipulation of water in all its forms, not just as a physical element, but as a carrier of emotions, memories, and biological change. Her tears weren't just poison. They were a sophisticated magical medium that could alter consciousness, induce specific emotional states, or even rewrite genetic patterns. This school of magic was based on the understanding that water is the universal solvent and the foundation of all life. Practitioners could manipulate the water content in human bodies to influence health, mood, and even thoughts. They could create elixirs that carried specific magical effects, develop poisons that targeted particular bloodlines, or craft love potions that actually rewrote the neurochemistry of attraction and desire. The Weeping Lady's story suggests that she was the last great master of this tradition, persecuted by other Valyrian factions who viewed water magic as inferior to fire magic or potentially threatening to their dominance. Her exile to Lys wasn't voluntary. She was driven out by rivals who feared her abilities to manipulate emotions and desires, powers that could undermine the rigid hierarchies that the Dragon Lord families had established. Her death gave birth to the poison known as the Tears of Lys. But this might not be the full extent of her legacy. The poison itself could be a degraded form of her original magical preparations, a single application of what was once a much more sophisticated system of biological and emotional manipulation. In her lifetime, she might have been capable of creating substances that could enhance intelligence, extend life, or even transfer memories between individuals. The free city of Lys, known for its pleasure houses, perfumes, and subtle poisons, might have been built on the remnants of her magical knowledge. The legendary beauty of Lysine men and women, their skill at creating cosmetics and love potions, their reputation for sophisticated sensual arts, all of this could trace back to techniques originally developed by the Weeping Lady's school of magic. But what if her lineage didn't end with her death? Water magic, unlike fire magic, might be more easily passed down through bloodlines without requiring direct magical training. Her descendants could carry dormant abilities that manifest as exceptional emotional intelligence, unusual empathy, or the ability to influence others through subtle chemical signals, pheromones, skin contact, or even shared drinks. These inheritors might not even realize their magical heritage. They could be scattered throughout Essos and Westeros, working as courtesans, merchants, healers, or advisors, unconsciously using their inherited abilities to read emotional states, influence decisions, or create subtle changes in the people around them. The most successful brothel keepers, the most persuasive merchants, the most effective spies. Some of these could be unknowing descendants of the Weeping Lady's magical tradition. The magical artifacts associated with water magic might still exist as well. Vials that can purify any liquid, mirrors that reflect emotional truth rather than physical appearance, jewelry that changes color based on the wearer's health or mood. These items could be scattered throughout the known world, waiting for someone with the right bloodline to activate their true potential. The resurgence of magic in the world might be awakening these dormant abilities. People with Weeping Lady heritage might begin experiencing vivid emotional dreams, finding that their tears have unusual properties, or discovering that they can sense the emotional states of others with uncanny accuracy. The ultimate implications are staggering. If water magic practitioners still exist, they could be influencing major political events through emotional manipulation, using their abilities to guide the decisions of kings and lords without anyone realizing what's happening. The Great Game of Thrones might have players that no one suspects, individuals whose weapons are tears rather than swords, whose power flows through goblets of wine rather than declarations of war. Theory 10. Rhaegar wasn't trying to create a prince. He was attempting to resurrect Valyria itself. Rhaegar Targaryen's obsession with prophecy wasn't about producing the prince that was promised. It was about something far more ambitious and terrifying. He believed he could trigger a magical renaissance that would restore the lost empire of Valyria, not just its bloodline, but its actual magical dominance over the known world. His actions, his choices, even his death, were all calculated steps in a ritual designed to reawaken dormant Valyrian magic on a continental scale. The traditional interpretation sees Rhaegar as a romantic figure pursuing prophecy about a chosen one who would save the world. But what if his understanding of the prophecies was far more complex and self-serving? Ancient Valyrian texts, the ones he studied obsessively at Summerhall, might have contained instructions for a magical working that required specific bloodline combinations, celestial alignments, and massive sacrificial events to succeed. His union with Lyanna Stark wasn't about love or even about producing a prophesied child. It was about creating a perfect, magical catalyst. Ice and fire, the ancient bloods of the first men in Valyria, combined in a single offspring who would serve as a living conduit for the magical energies Rhaegar was trying to channel. Jon Snow wasn't meant to be a hero. He was designed to be a magical battery, a human focus for power that could reshape the world. The timing of everything supports this theory. Rhaegar disappeared with Lyanna just as a comet appeared in the sky. The same type of celestial event that often coincides with major magical happenings in this world. He arranged for his own death at the Trident, ensuring that his sacrifice would occur at the precise moment when the magical conditions were optimal. Robert's warhammer didn't just kill a prince, it completed a ritual that had been years in the making. The chaos that followed, Robert's rebellion, the destruction of the Targaryen dynasty, the years of warfare and instability, wasn't an unintended consequence of Rhaegar's actions. It was the point. Valyrian magic traditionally required massive amounts of death and chaos to fuel its greatest workings. The doom itself might have been the result of a similar magical experiment that got out of control. Rhaegar was trying to harness that same destructive power, but in a more controlled and directed way. His melancholy and obsession with ancient songs suddenly make more sense in this context. He wasn't mourning for a lost love or worrying about an uncertain future. He was carrying the terrible knowledge of what he was about to unleash on the world. The Song of Ice and Fire wasn't a prophecy about balance and heroism. It was an instruction manual for magical devastation disguised as poetry. The magical events that began accelerating after his death, the return of dragons, the resurgence of the others, the strengthening of various magical bloodlines, weren't random coincidences. They were the intended results of his working, the first signs that his ritual had succeeded. Valyrian magic was indeed returning to the world, just as he had planned, but without a living Targaryen of his knowledge and power to control it. Daenerys's dragons weren't born from love and sacrifice in the traditional sense. They were hatched because the magical groundwork Rhaegar had laid finally reached critical mass. The dragon eggs responded to the confluence of Targaryen blood, massive death, and the specific magical conditions that Rhaegar had been trying to create for years. Her dragons were actually his dragons, born from a ritual he had initiated before his own death. The various magical bloodlines that began manifesting stronger abilities, Stark warging, Targaryen dragon dreams, even the enhanced prophetic abilities of various other houses, were all responding to the same magical renaissance that Rhaegar had triggered. He wasn't trying to save the world from darkness, he was trying to return it to an age when magic ruled and Valyrian descendants sat at the apex of power. The tragic irony is that his plan might have worked too well. The magical forces he unleashed couldn't be controlled by the weakened Targaryen bloodline that survived him. Instead of a new Valyrian empire with himself or his descendants at its head, he created a world where magic ran wild, where ancient threats returned, and where the very forces he had tried to harness ultimately threatened to consume everything he had sought to rule. Even now, the magical energies he set in motion continue to reshape the world. Every dragon that hatches, every prophetic dream that guides a major decision, every manifestation of supernatural power, they all trace back to that moment when a melancholy prince decided to sacrifice everything, including his own life and the stability of the realm, to reclaim the lost glory of his ancestors. Theory 11. The Iron Bank's true goal is economic domination of the entire known world. The Iron Bank of Braavos presents itself as a simple financial institution that follows the motto, "The Iron Bank will have its due." But their true agenda is far more sinister and comprehensive. They're systematically engineering the economic collapse and dependency of every major power in both Westeros and Essos, positioning themselves to become the ultimate puppet masters of human civilization. Their strategy isn't just reactive lending and debt collection, it's active economic warfare conducted across multiple generations. They don't just fund wars, they create the conditions that make wars inevitable, then profit from both sides while ensuring that the aftermath leaves borrowers more dependent on their services than ever before. Every loan they make, every conflict they finance, every debt they collect is part of a vast economic web designed to concentrate power in Braavos while appearing to maintain the independence of other regions. The genius of their approach lies in its subtlety and patience. They don't conquer through military force, which would unite their enemies against them and expose their intentions. Instead, they conquer through dependency, creating situations where rulers have no choice but to borrow more, mortgage more of their sovereignty, and gradually surrender control over their own economic policies to their Braavosi creditors. Their funding of Stannis Baratheon's claim during the War of the Five Kings wasn't about supporting the rightful king, it was about prolonging a devastating conflict that would bankrupt all participants and destabilize the Westerosi economy for generations. They knew Stannis had little chance of ultimate victory, but his campaign served their purposes perfectly by forcing other claimants to seek funding elsewhere, driving up the cost of warfare, and ensuring that whoever eventually won the throne would inherit a realm drowning in debt. The same pattern emerges with their involvement in Essos. Their early financial support for Daenerys wasn't about Targaryen restoration. It was about disrupting the slave-based economy that competed with Braavosi commercial interests. By backing someone committed to ending slavery, they could eliminate economic competitors while appearing to support noble humanitarian goals. The chaos that followed slavery's abolition created opportunities for Braavosi merchants to establish new trade relationships and supply chains that benefited their interests. Their legendary reliability as creditors serves a strategic purpose, beyond just maintaining their reputation. When the Iron Bank always collects its debts, it creates a psychological dependency among borrowers who begin to see Braavosi financial support as both inevitable and necessary. Rulers stop looking for alternatives and start planning their entire economic policies around maintaining their relationship with the bank, gradually surrendering their independence one loan at a time. The timing of their debt collection calls isn't coincidental, it's strategically calculated to create maximum disruption. They call in debts when rulers are facing succession crises, during harvest failures, or in the aftermath of expensive military campaigns. This forces borrowers to choose between defaulting, which brings dire consequences, or accepting even more onerous terms that further increase their dependency. Their network of information gathering rivals any spy organization in the known world. They need to know everything about political stability, military capabilities, natural resources, and succession plans to make their lending decisions, but this intelligence also allows them to manipulate events to their advantage. A well-timed rumor about a ruler's creditworthiness can trigger political instability that creates new lending opportunities. The free cities that compete with Braavos economically have all experienced mysterious setbacks that benefit Braavosi interests. Volantis's attempts to rebuild its empire have been consistently undermined by conflicts that drain their resources. Pentos has been kept weak through carefully orchestrated disputes with Braavos. Even Tyrosh and Lys find their traditional industries facing new competition from Braavosi-backed alternatives. Their ultimate goal might be the gradual transformation of the entire known world into a collection of nominally independent but economically dependent client states. Rather than ruling through conquest, they would rule through debt, controlling the economic policies of every major power while allowing local rulers to maintain the illusion of sovereignty. The return of magic to the world might actually serve their interests. Magical conflicts are expensive, requiring specialized weapons, protective measures, and often resulting in widespread destruction that creates new reconstruction opportunities. The Iron Bank could position itself as the primary financier of magical defense, making every kingdom dependent on Braavosi funding to survive supernatural threats. Theory 12. The Hightowers and Meisters have been suppressing dangerous knowledge for centuries. The relationship between House Hightower and the Citadel isn't just patronage, it's an active conspiracy to control the flow of dangerous knowledge throughout Westeros. The Hightowers, with their ancient lineage and rumored dabbling in higher mysteries, have been working with the Meisters to systematically suppress magical knowledge, inconvenient historical truths, and any information that could destabilize the careful balance of power they've spent centuries establishing. The Citadel's reputation as a center of learning and objective scholarship is carefully constructed propaganda. In reality, the institution serves as a massive filtering and control system, determining what knowledge gets preserved, what gets lost, and what gets actively suppressed. The Meister's famous skepticism toward magic isn't scientific rationalism. It's a deliberate policy designed to prevent the kind of magical excesses that led to Valeria's doom. The Hightowers guide this agenda from behind the scenes. Their position in Old Town gives them direct oversight of the Citadel's operations, while their ancient family knowledge allows them to identify which areas of study pose the greatest threats to stability. They've seen what unchecked magical knowledge can do: the destruction of entire civilizations, the creation of uncontrollable supernatural forces, the collapse of natural order itself. Their strategy involves several layers of control. First, they influence which texts get copied and preserved versus which ones are allowed to decay or mysteriously disappear. Ancient books containing detailed magical instructions, dangerous alchemical formulas, or politically inconvenient historical accounts have a tendency to suffer from fires, floods, or simple neglect when they threaten Hightower interests. Second, they guide the Meister's research agendas, subtly steering investigations away from potentially dangerous areas while promoting more controllable forms of knowledge. The focus on secular learning, practical sciences, and historical scholarship that excludes magical elements isn't accidental. It's a deliberate attempt to channel intellectual curiosity into safe directions. Third, they use the Meister network to monitor and influence the magical knowledge that exists outside the Citadel. Masters serving in various castles report back on any signs of magical activity, unusual artifacts, or emerging supernatural abilities. This intelligence allows the Hightowers to intervene before dangerous knowledge can spread or dangerous powers can fully develop. The great library fires that have occurred throughout Westerosi history, similar to the burning of the Library of Alexandria, might not have been accidents or the result of war. They could have been deliberate operations to destroy collections of knowledge that the Hightower-Meister alliance deemed too dangerous to preserve. The lost knowledge that Meisters occasionally reference might not be lost at all, but carefully hidden in secure Hightower vaults. Their influence extends to the training of individual Meisters. The vows that Meisters take, supposedly to ensure objectivity and dedication to knowledge, also serve to control them. By requiring Meisters to abandon family ties and personal ambitions, the system ensures their primary loyalty is to the Citadel itself, which means loyalty to Hightower guidance. The selective preservation of historical records allows them to shape how current generations understand the past. Inconvenient truths about the origins of noble houses, the real causes of major conflicts, or the true extent of magical influence on historical events can be gradually edited out of the official record, leaving only versions that support the current power structure. Their anti-magic stance serves multiple purposes. By promoting skepticism towards supernatural forces, they prevent the general population from seeking magical solutions to their problems, maintaining the monopoly of traditional power structures. They also reduce the likelihood that magical knowledge will spread widely enough to become uncontrollable. The timing of various discoveries and rediscoveries of knowledge isn't coincidental. When the Hightowers need to introduce new ideas or technologies to serve their purposes, relevant texts suddenly become available, or previously overlooked passages gain new significance. This allows them to guide technological and intellectual development according to their long-term strategic needs. Their ultimate goal might be the maintenance of a carefully balanced world where human civilization remains stable and predictable, free from the chaos that magic and dangerous knowledge inevitably bring. They've appointed themselves as guardians of humanity's future, determining what knowledge is safe to possess and what truths are too dangerous to reveal. Theory 13. The 5 forts are containing something far worse than the others, and it's starting to break free. The 5 forts in the far east of Essos aren't just defensive structures against the demons of the Grey Waste. They're a massive containment system holding back an ancient force so terrible that it makes the others look like a minor inconvenience. These colossal black stone fortifications represent humanity's last line of defense against something that once nearly destroyed all life on the planet, and the seals are beginning to weaken. The sheer scale of these structures defies any reasonable defensive purpose. Each fort is larger than the wall of Westeros, built from the same mysterious black stone found in other ancient sites associated with catastrophic magical events. The civilization that built them possessed knowledge and power that dwarfs anything seen in recorded history, suggesting they were responding to a threat of unimaginable magnitude. The demons that supposedly emerge from the Grey Waste aren't random monsters. They're scouts, advance agents, or perhaps escaped fragments of whatever lies imprisoned beyond the forts. The fact that these incursions have been increasing in frequency and intensity suggests that the primary containment is failing, allowing more and more of the trapped force to seep through the barriers. The Grey Waste itself might not be a natural desert, but rather the remnant of an ancient battlefield where this entity was first encountered and barely defeated. The barren, lifeless landscape could be the permanent scar left by a conflict so devastating that the land itself was drained of all life force, rendered incapable of supporting any form of existence. The waste grows larger each year because the influence of the trapped force continues to spread outward from its prison. The civilization that built the 5 forts clearly understood that direct destruction of this entity was impossible, so they chose containment instead. But containment requires constant maintenance, regular reinforcement, and most importantly, people who understand how the system works. The knowledge of the fort's true purpose has been lost. and the current inhabitants of Yitai and the surrounding regions treat them as simple border defenses rather than the critical magical infrastructure they actually represent. The timing of various global magical events suggests a connection to the deteriorating situation in the Far East. As magic returns to the world, as dragons are reborn and the others stir, the seals holding back the entity in the grey waste grow weaker. The same forces that power magical resurgence elsewhere are eroding the barriers that keep this ancient threat contained. The entity itself might be something that predates not just human civilization but life as we understand it. It could be a force of pure entropy, a cosmic cancer that consumes reality itself, or perhaps the remnant of a failed creation from the dawn of the world. The fact that it requires such massive and permanent containment suggests it cannot be negotiated with, reasoned with, or appeased, only held at bay through constant vigilance and overwhelming force. The black stone construction of the forts links them to other mysterious sites around the world. The base of the High Tower in Old Town, certain structures in Valyria, ancient ruins in Sothorios. These might all be part of a global network of containment and monitoring systems designed to track and limit the influence of various supernatural threats. The forts represent the largest and most critical node in this network. Recent reports of strange phenomena in the Far East, unusual weather patterns, reports of the dead walking, whispers of entire cities found empty and lifeless suggest that the containment is failing more rapidly than anyone realizes. The entity is extending its influence through cracks in the barrier, testing the strength of its prison and preparing for eventual escape. The truly terrifying possibility is that the others' march south was triggered not by their own agenda, but by their instinctive recognition that something far worse was stirring in the east. They might have been fleeing rather than conquering, driven by ancient memories of what lies beyond the 5 forts, and desperate to reach safer territory before the real apocalypse begins. If the containment fails completely, the escape of this entity would make every previous threat look trivial. By comparison, the long night, the doom of Valyria, the various magical catastrophes that have shaped history, all of these could be mere echoes of what happens when this ancient force breaks free from its prison and begins to spread across the world once again. The heroes and political players of Westeros and Western Essos remain completely unaware of this growing threat, focused on their local conflicts and concerns, while a truly existential danger builds strength in the forgotten corners of the world. By the time they realize what's happening, it may already be too late to prevent a catastrophe that could end not just human civilization, but all life as it exists. Theory 14. What if Lyanna Stark had survived? The Targaryen restoration, that could have changed everything. If Lyanna Stark had survived childbirth at the Tower of Joy, the entire political landscape of Westeros would have been transformed in ways that would make the current conflict seem like minor skirmishes. Her survival would have created a cascade of consequences that could have prevented civil wars, established a legitimate Targaryen restoration, and fundamentally altered the relationship between the major houses of the realm. The immediate impact would have been Robert's rebellion ending not with tragic romantic martyrdom, but with a living, breathing complication that no amount of political maneuvering could sweep under the carpet. Robert's rage over Lyanna's abduction would have to confront the reality of her willing participation in events, her living testimony about what actually happened, and most importantly, her ability to advocate for her son and his Targaryen heritage. Lyanna's fierce northern independence and her proven willingness to defy conventional expectations would have made her a formidable political force. She wouldn't have been content to hide in exile or remain silent about Jon's parentage. Her presence would have forced the realm to acknowledge the legitimacy of Rhaegar's actions and the validity of their union, creating an immediate succession crisis that Robert's new regime couldn't simply ignore. The revelation of Jon's true parentage, coming directly from Lyanna herself, rather than through complex investigations and interpretations, would have carried undeniable weight. She could have provided details about Rhaegar's intentions, the circumstances of their relationship, and the prophetic elements that motivated their actions. This first-hand testimony would have legitimized Jon's claim to the Iron Throne in ways that later revelations never could. Robert's psychological state would have been completely different, faced with a living Lyanna who chose another man over him. Instead of being able to maintain his romantic idealization of their relationship and his hatred of the Targaryens, he would have to confront the reality that his beloved actively rejected him for someone he considered his greatest enemy. This could have driven him to even greater extremes of violence, or conversely, might have forced him to face the truth about the nature of his obsession. The northern political situation would have been revolutionized. Lyanna's return would have dramatically affected the relationship between the Starks and the new Baratheon regime. Ned's famous honor would have been tested by having to choose between loyalty to his new king and protection of his sister and her child. The North might have remained neutral in the new political order, or even actively opposed Robert's rule. Lyanna's survival could have prevented many of the disasters that followed. With a living Targaryen heir of unquestionable legitimacy and a mother capable of advocating for his rights, the later Targaryen restoration attempts might have been unnecessary. Viserys and Daenerys could have been brought into a united claim rather than pursuing separate, ultimately destructive paths to power. The religious and cultural implications would have been enormous. Lyanna could have served as a bridge between the old gods of the North and the Targaryen tradition, potentially creating a new synthesis that honored both heritage traditions. Jon's upbringing would have been completely different, combining Northern values with Targaryen heritage from the beginning, rather than discovering his identity as an adult. Her influence on Jon's development would have produced a very different kind of potential ruler. Instead of the brooding, reluctant leader shaped by bastard status and divided loyalties, Jon could have grown up confident in his identity, trained in both Northern and Targaryen traditions, and prepared from childhood for eventual leadership. He might have become the bridge between ice and fire that the prophecies suggested, but in a much more literal and politically viable way. The marriage politics of the realm would have been completely transformed. A legitimate Targaryen heir with Northern backing would have been an incredibly attractive marriage prospect, potentially creating alliances that could have stabilized the realm for generations. The various civil wars that plagued Robert's reign and aftermath might never have occurred if the succession had been more clearly established from the beginning. Even the magical elements of the story would have been different. Jon's dragon heritage might have manifested earlier and more completely, with proper guidance and acknowledgement. The return of dragons to the world might have happened through a different path, one that didn't require the destruction and chaos that marked Daenerys' campaign. The ultimate tragedy is that Lyanna's survival could have created a timeline where the great conflicts that defined the later period never occurred, where Targaryen restoration happened through political negotiation rather than conquest, and where the realm achieved the stability and prosperity that it desperately needed but never quite managed to attain. Theory 15. The tragedy of Summerhall was sabotaged. Someone wanted to prevent. The return of dragons. The tragedy of Summerhall wasn't an accident caused by a dragon hatching ritual gone wrong. It was a carefully orchestrated assassination designed to prevent the return of dragons to the world and eliminate the Targaryen bloodline's strongest magical practitioners. Someone with deep knowledge of Targaryen capabilities and access to the highest levels of the royal court deliberately sabotaged what should have been the crowning achievement of King Aegon's reign. The official story suggests that Aegon's attempt to hatch dragon eggs through fire and blood resulted in a catastrophic blaze that killed him, his heir, Prince Duncan, and many others. But the convenient timing, the specific targeting of key Targaryen family members, and the complete destruction of any evidence suggest a more sinister explanation. Someone wanted to ensure that dragons would never return, and they were willing to commit regicide and mass murder to achieve that goal. The saboteur would have needed intimate knowledge of Targaryen magical practices, access to the royal families, private plans, and the ability to manipulate the ritual itself without being detected. This points to someone within the inner circle of advisors, possibly a maester with deep knowledge of magical theory, a lord with ancient grievances against Targaryen power, or even a member of a secret organization dedicated to preventing the return of magical forces to the world. The timing wasn't coincidental. Aegon V, known as Aegon the Unlikely, had spent his reign strengthening the common people and reducing the power of the great lords. His successful restoration of dragons would have given him unprecedented power to enforce his reforms and potentially reshape Westerosi society entirely. The great houses had every reason to fear what a dragon-riding Aegon might accomplish, and preventing his success would have been a priority for anyone who benefited from the existing power structure. The ritual itself might have been corrupted through subtle changes to the procedures, the introduction of incompatible magical elements, or the manipulation of the prophetic texts that guided the attempt. A saboteur with sufficient magical knowledge could have ensured that instead of hatching dragons, the ritual would produce an uncontrollable conflagration that would destroy everything and everyone present. The presence of Duncan the Small at Summerhall adds another layer of tragedy and suspicion. Duncan had renounced his claim to the throne to marry for love, but his survival and potential future children could have continued the Targaryen line with a different perspective on royal duty. His death ensured that the succession passed to Jaehaerys II and eventually to Aerys II, whose madness would provide the perfect excuse for ending Targaryen rule entirely. The destruction was so complete that no physical evidence of what actually happened survived. This level of thoroughness suggests planning and preparation that goes beyond a simple magical accident. The saboteur would have needed to ensure that not only did the ritual fail, but that the failure left no traces that could be studied, learned from, or used to attempt future dragon hatchings. The long-term consequences served the saboteur's interests perfectly. The failure at Summerhall discouraged future attempts at dragon restoration for generations. The Targaryen dynasty was weakened by the loss of its most capable leaders and most knowledgeable magical practitioners. The fear of repeating the tragedy made subsequent Targaryens reluctant to experiment with their heritage, ensuring that dragons remained extinct. The identity of the saboteur might never be definitively known, but the sophistication of the operation suggests institutional backing rather than individual action. The Citadel, with its anti-magic agenda and deep knowledge of historical magical practices, would have had both the motivation and the capability to orchestrate such an operation. Alternatively, a coalition of great lords working through carefully placed agents could have achieved the same result. The true tragedy is that the sabotage might have worked too well. By preventing the controlled return of dragons under Aegon V's guidance, the saboteur created conditions that eventually led to their uncontrolled return under Daenerys. The magical forces that the ritual at Summerhall was meant to channel safely didn't disappear. They simply built up pressure until they exploded back into the world in far more destructive and chaotic ways. The failure at Summerhall also eliminated the possibility of a gradual, politically stable reintegration of dragons into Westerosi society. Aegon V might have been able to manage the return of dragons in ways that strengthened rather than threatened the existing order. Instead, when dragons finally returned, they came as instruments of conquest and revolution, fulfilling the saboteur's worst fears about what magical power could do to political stability. Theory 16. What if Aegon had listened to Rhaenys about Dawn, the alliance that could have prevented every war? The entire blood-soaked history of Targaryen-Dornish relations could have been avoided if Aegon the Conqueror had heeded his sister-wife Rhaenys's prophetic words about Dorne. When she told him, "You do not understand Dorne. I shall not command it. I shall not make you a widow." She wasn't just expressing personal reluctance. She was offering a glimpse of an alternative path that could have changed the course of Westerosi history forever. Rhaenys understood something about Dorne that Aegon, for all his military genius, completely missed. The Dornish weren't just another kingdom to be conquered through superior force. They represented a fundamentally different approach to power, one based on adaptation, cunning, and the patient exploitation of their enemies' weaknesses. Their desert homeland had shaped them into a people who could outlast any invader simply by making conquest more costly than it was worth. If Aegon had approached Dorne as an equal partner rather than a target for conquest, he could have secured their alliance through negotiation, marriage, and mutual respect. The Dornish valued their independence above all else, but they also understood the benefits of being on the winning side of a continental transformation. A diplomatic approach offering them autonomy within a larger Targaryen empire could have succeeded where military force ultimately failed. The strategic implications of a willing Dornish alliance would have been enormous. Dorne's unique military capabilities, their guerrilla warfare expertise, their knowledge of desert survival, their innovative weapons and tactics could have been turned toward external threats rather than resistance against Targaryen rule. The combined might of dragons and Dornish cunning could have extended Targaryen influence far beyond Westeros itself. The marriage alliances that could have been forged immediately would have created lasting bonds between the houses. Instead of the generations of resentment and occasional warfare that marked actual Targaryen-Dornish relations, there could have been a steady exchange of children, culture, and knowledge that strengthened both sides. The famous Dornish approach to gender equality and sexual freedom could have influenced Targaryen succession practices in ways that prevented later civil wars. Rhaenys herself might have become the architect of this alliance, serving as a permanent ambassador and cultural bridge between the Targaryen court and Dornish society. Her understanding of both cultures could have created synthesis that borrowed the best elements from each tradition. The religious and cultural practices of Dorne could have been integrated into the broader Targaryen empire without the forced conversion and cultural suppression that marked other conquests. The economic benefits would have been substantial and immediate. Dorne's position at the southern tip of Westeros made it a natural gateway for trade with the Summer Isles, the eastern continents, and other exotic markets. A willing partnership could have developed these trade routes in ways that benefited both regions, creating wealth and prosperity that would have funded further expansion and development. The military applications of this alliance would have extended far beyond Westeros. Dornish expertise in desert warfare could have been invaluable in potential campaigns in Essos, particularly in regions like the Red Waste or the disputed lands where traditional Westerosi military approaches would have been inadequate. The combination of dragon mobility and Dornish tactical innovation could have created an unstoppable military force. The cultural exchange would have enriched both societies immeasurably. Dornish approaches to law, governance, and social organization could have influenced Targaryen policies throughout the realm. The famous Dornish tolerance for different lifestyles and beliefs could have made the Targaryen Empire more inclusive and stable, reducing the religious and cultural tensions that periodically erupted into violence. The succession implications alone could have prevented the Dance of the Dragons entirely. Dornish practices regarding female inheritance and the treatment of bastards could have been incorporated into Targaryen law, eliminating many of the succession disputes that later tore the dynasty apart. A clear, consistent succession system that honored both male and female claimants could have prevented generations of civil war. The psychological impact on the other kingdoms would have been profound. The sight of Dorne willingly joining the Targaryen Empire would have demonstrated that Aegon's rule offered benefits beyond mere submission. Other kingdoms might have been more willing to accept Targaryen authority if they saw it as partnership, rather than conquest. The long-term stability of the realm would have been dramatically different. Instead of having a restive, semi-independent Dorne constantly threatening rebellion or independence, the Targaryens would have had their most capable and loyal allies anchoring the southern borders. The political energy that went into managing Dornish resistance could have been directed toward more productive endeavors. The ultimate tragedy is that Rhaenys's wisdom was ignored in favor of the traditional masculine approach of conquest through force. Her death in Dorne became a symbol of Targaryen overreach rather than a catalyst for the alliance she had envisioned. The centuries of conflict that followed could have been centuries of cooperation, mutual prosperity, and shared strength that would have made the Targaryen dynasty truly unshakable. Theory 17. The Dance of Dragons was a prophetic cycle, and it's going to happen again. The Dance of the Dragons wasn't just a singular catastrophic civil war. It was the first manifestation of a recurring prophetic cycle that governs the relationship between dragons, Targaryens, and the balance of power in the world. This cycle is driven by the fundamental instability that comes with absolute power, and it will continue to repeat until either the dragons are permanently eliminated or humanity learns to manage their destructive potential. The pattern begins with the rise of dragons and their riders to positions of unprecedented power. The combination of Targaryen blood and dragon bond creates individuals who transcend normal human limitations, becoming living weapons of mass destruction with the ability to reshape civilization according to their will. This power inevitably corrupts, creating conflicts between dragon riders who each believe their vision for the world is the correct one. The saying, "When a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin," isn't just about individual madness. It's about the inherent instability that dragon bond creates in human psychology. The experience of wielding such power, of seeing the world from dragonback, of holding the ability to reduce cities to ash with a word, fundamentally alters human consciousness in ways that make peaceful coexistence between multiple dragon riders nearly impossible. The original dance established the template for how these cycles unfold. Initial cooperation between dragon riders gives way to competition, then to open conflict, then to mutual destruction that eliminates most or all of the dragons and their riders. The survivors, if any, are usually too traumatized or politically weakened to maintain the previous level of power, creating space for the world to recover until dragons return and the cycle begins anew. The magical forces that govern dragon hatching and bonding seem to be designed to prevent any permanent concentration of dragon power. Dragons appear when the world needs them to address existential threats or reset corrupted power structures, but they also carry within themselves the seeds of their own destruction. The very traits that make dragons effective, their intelligence, their independence, their powerful bonds with specific riders, ensure that they will eventually turn on each other. The return of dragons under Daenerys represents the beginning of a new cycle, not the end of the previous one. Her dragons were born from the same forces that created the original Targaryen dragons, and they carry the same potential for both salvation and destruction. The political conflicts that emerged around her claim to power followed the same patterns that led to the original dance, suggesting that the underlying forces haven't changed. The prophetic nature of this cycle means it operates according to magical laws rather than purely political ones. The conflicts between dragon riders aren't just about succession disputes or personal ambitions. They're expressions of deeper cosmic forces that use dragons and their riders as instruments to maintain some kind of universal balance. When dragon Power becomes too concentrated or stable. These forces ensure that internal conflict destroys it. The cycle's timing appears to be connected to broader magical patterns in the world. Dragons return during periods of great upheaval when existing power structures are failing and new approaches are needed. But once they've served their purpose in reshaping the world, the same forces that brought them back ensure that they don't become permanent fixtures that could upset the natural order. Future manifestations of this cycle will likely follow the same basic pattern but with variations appropriate to their specific historical context. The next dance might involve conflicts between different types of dragon riders, disputes over the proper use of dragon power, or competition between dragons and other magical forces for dominance. The specific details will change, but the underlying dynamic of rise, conflict, and destruction will remain constant. The only way to break this cycle would be to fundamentally change either the nature of dragons, the psychology of their riders, or the magical forces that govern their interaction. This might require a level of understanding and wisdom that transcends normal human capabilities, or perhaps the intervention of other magical entities with the power to impose new rules on the relationship between dragons and the world. The truly sobering implication is that every future appearance of dragons carries within it the seeds of another dance. No matter how noble the intentions of their riders, no matter how desperate the circumstances that call them forth, dragons will always eventually turn on each other, because that's what the underlying magical forces require. The cycle is bigger than any individual dragon or rider, and it will continue until either dragons cease to exist entirely or the fundamental laws that govern magic in this world are somehow changed. Theory 18. Geryon Lannister found something in Valyria, and it's still affecting. The Lannister bloodline. Geryon Lannister's voyage to the ruins of Valyria wasn't the failed treasure-hunting expedition that history records. It was a desperate mission to find a cure for a hereditary curse affecting the Lannister bloodline. And his discovery of something in those ruins continues to influence his family's fate in ways that no one understands. His failure to return wasn't due to the usual dangers of Valyria, but because what he found there changed him so fundamentally that he could never come home. The curse affecting the Lannisters isn't obvious, like a traditional magical affliction. It's subtle, manifesting as the psychological and physical deformities that plague the family across generations. Tyrion's dwarfism, Joffrey's psychopathy, Cersei's paranoia, even Tywin's emotional coldness could all be symptoms of a magical contamination that has been building in intensity over time. Geryon, perhaps the most perceptive of Tywin's generation, recognized the pattern and set out to find its source and solution. The Lannister connection to gold isn't just economic. It might be magical. Their ancestral wealth could trace back to some ancient bargain or magical working that provided prosperity in exchange for something that wouldn't be missed until generations later. The family's legendary ability to find gold, their seemingly inexhaustible wealth, their golden hair and green eyes, all of these could be signs of magical enhancement that came with a hidden price. Geryon's research before his departure would have led him to Valyrian texts that described not just the location of lost treasures, but the magical practices that created them. Valyrian steel, gold working, and other crafts involved magical processes that could have long-term effects on those who worked with them or inherited objects created through these methods. Bright Raw, the Lannister Valyrian steel sword that Geryon sought, might have been more than just a weapon. It could have been a key component in managing or controlling whatever magical working was affecting his family. His journey to Valyria would have been incredibly dangerous, not just because of the physical hazards, but because of the magical contamination that still lingers in the ruins. However, his Lannister heritage might have provided some protection or even attraction to whatever forces still operate there. The magical signature that marked his bloodline could have resonated with Valyrian remnants in ways that were both helpful and ultimately transformative. What Geryon found in Valyria changed him so completely that returning to Westeros became impossible. He might have discovered the true source of his family's curse and learned that curing it would require sacrifices that his conscience couldn't accept. Alternatively, he could have been transformed by exposure to concentrated Valyrian magic, becoming something that was no longer entirely human and could no longer safely interact with the unprotected world. His continued influence on the family manifests in subtle ways that go unrecognized. The tactical brilliance that Tyrion displays, seemingly beyond his formal education, could be inherited knowledge passed down through magical means. Cersei's increasing paranoia might be a response to psychic pressure from Geryon's transformed state. Even Tywin's late-life decisions could have been influenced by his unconscious awareness of his brother's fate. The magical artifacts that the Lannisters possess or encounter could be connected to Geryon's discoveries. Objects that seem to have unusual properties, unexpected inheritance patterns, or which provide uncanny luck or insight might be tools that he sent back through magical means, trying to help his family even though he cannot return himself. Timing of various Lannister family disasters correlates with events that could have triggered responses from Geryon's transformed state. Major crises, threats to family members, or challenges to Lannister power might activate whatever magical connection he maintains with his bloodline, leading to interventions that appear to be luck or coincidence, but are actually his continuing protection. The resolution of the Lannister curse might require understanding what Geryon discovered and either completing his work or undoing it entirely. This could involve other family members making their own journey to Valyria, finding ways to communicate with his transformed state, or discovering magical alternatives that don't require the same sacrifices he made. The ultimate tragedy is that Geryon's sacrifice might have been successful in ways that no one recognizes. The Lannister family's survival through various political catastrophes, their ability to maintain power despite making numerous enemies, their continued wealth despite enormous expenditures, all of this could be the result of his ongoing magical intervention, paid for by his permanent exile from the world he sought to protect. These theories reveal that the world of A Song of Ice and Fire operates on levels of complexity that go far beyond the surface. Political intrigue and obvious magical elements. Every major event, every ancient institution, every mysterious disappearance might be connected to deeper patterns of manipulation, prophecy, and cosmic balance that span millennia. The true Game of Thrones isn't just about who sits on the Iron Throne. It's about the clash between ancient forces that have been shaping human civilization since the dawn of history. The faceless men, the children of the forest, the mysterious entities beyond the five forts, the lingering influences of dead sorcerers. All of these represent players in a game so vast and long-term that most of the human participants don't even realize they're being moved around the board. Perhaps the most unsettling implication of these theories is that the conflicts we think we understand, the wars, the political maneuvering, the rise and fall of dynasties, might all be symptoms of much larger forces at work. The human characters we follow might be less like autonomous agents making their own choices, and more like instruments being played by powers that operate according to logics and timeframes that transcend individual human understanding. The return of magic to the world isn't just about dragons and prophecies. It's about the reactivation of ancient systems of control and influence that have been dormant for centuries. As these forces awaken and begin to act more directly, the already complex political landscape of Westeros becomes even more unpredictable and dangerous. The ultimate question these theories raise is whether humanity has any real agency in its own fate, or whether the great game has already been rigged by players who operate on such a vast scale that victory and defeat are measured in geological time rather than human generations. The answer to that question might determine not just who rules Westeros, but whether human civilization survives long enough to rule anything at all.